Hey. Be aware, this is going to be a hot mic. They can hear me right now on it, so everything around here is going to get caught on camera by everybody. You folks are all aware, this right here, ooh, I hit it, is a live mic. So this is going to be streaming live. Anything you say is going to be caught on audio right here. Or, you know, say all the things you want out loud.
Or we can chant, vote for Matt, vote for Matt.
Anything. Ooh.
It's all right. Thank you for
Hey, Bruce, we need to get Armand. I'll go get him. Armand? I'll go get him. Yeah.
Hey, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Get your attention. Okay, thank you, everybody. If we can just kind of hold it down here a little bit, we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for coming tonight to the District 6 Supervisor debate. We're really excited to be able to host this debate tonight. I know that when you hear some of the insights from the candidates, the answers to questions, it'll really help inform everybody in here for ourselves, and as we're talking to our friends and our networks, you know, kind of inform us on how we will vote in the November election for the District 6 Supervisor. But before we get started, I just wanted to thank our candidates, Matt, Christine, Sonja, for being here tonight, Chuck Nevius, our moderator, for being here tonight. I have a few other thank yous and a few intros to make before we get started. We'll get through this in about, the whole thing's going to be about 5 minutes kind of set up here, and then we'll get started right to the debate, that's for sure. But a few welcomes and thank yous. We have Stefan Cook, who's on the Board of Education. And Sophie Maxwell, former D10 supervisor, thank you both for coming. We'd also like to thank our host of the building here. Cloudflare is the company at 101 Townsend, and they've been great community partners in letting us use their facility. So we want to thank Preston and Kayla, who are representing Cloudflare tonight. Thank you very much. And also, I wanted to thank Nancy Tom. Nancy is our Vice President of Communications and External Affairs from the Eastern Neighborhoods. Yeah, if everybody can silence their cell phones, smartphones, and so on, that would be great. Okay, but I'd like to introduce Nancy Tung. Nancy was the lead for our debate preparation committee. So Nancy, working along with members from the Academic Pattern Club, from the Tenderloin Housing Clinic and others, which I'll talk about in a moment. Kind of pull the questions together in big groups of questions and work with our moderator to prepare the debate. So thank you very much. I'd also like to let you know that we have Spanish translators here tonight. So we have two translators, Elisa and Ben. There's Elisa and Ben up here, and they're going to be translating. We have a group of folks here tonight that will be listening to this or being translated in Spanish. Also, if you're Facebook friendly and you want to check in, go ahead and do that. I'll pop it up on your page. So we're live streaming the debate tonight, so that'll get folks to join in. Just a little background on the clubs that are co-hosting tonight. So my name is Bruce Agnew. I'm the president of the Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club. And our club was established by the residents of San Francisco Supervisor Districts 3, 6, and 10 to organize voters and provide a discussion and educational forum to address the most pressing issues facing these eastern neighborhoods of the city. This Democratic Club will focus on issues utilizing an urbanism, environmental, and social equity-focused approach. SFDNDC will endorse candidates and propositions which support the platform and values of the club. Another co-host is the United Democratic Club. The president is Corey Smith. Corey, where are you?
What's going on? Check in and share the video on your Facebook so all your friends can watch.
So the United Democratic Club is the largest Democratic club in San Francisco. The mission is to empower Democrats across San Francisco to foster civic and philanthropic engagement. Founded in 2016, United Dems is a diverse group of Democrats who seek to unify San Francisco's many shades of Democratic blue, so we are best prepared to promote and defend Democratic ideals on a local, state, and national level. Our next co-host is the Tenderloin Housing Clinic. The mission of the Tenderloin Housing Clinic is to prevent tenant displacement, to preserve and expand the city's low-cost housing stock, and to provide comprehensive legal assistance to low-income tenants. The clinic is successful in fulfilling this mission by providing free legal services, securing SRO units through the Master Lease Program, and offering comprehensive support services to our clients. Resident leaders of the CCSRO, the CEOP, and LaVos programs of the Tenderloin Housing Clinic contributed to tonight's debate by developing questions and spreading the word about the debate to residents of the Tenderloin and SoMa. Just wrapping up here, if you're interested in joining either the Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club or the United Democratic Club, at the end of the debate, you can see our representatives up here at these first two tables. And then also, if you'd like more information about the Tenderloin Housing Clinic or any of the other groups that I've mentioned, please see, I think her team is over here. You can see her and some of the team to answer questions. Now I'd like to introduce Armand Kowalewski. And Armand is provided some services to help us promote tonight's debate and the D10 debate. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Armand.
Thank you, Bruce. I like to use the services to make it very ominous sounding. My name is Armand Kowalewski. I work for Resistance Labs. We manage mass peer-to-peer text messaging programs for political campaigns, nonprofits, municipal governments, and any other organization that wants to have real human communication to reach people where they communicate and how they talk. So if you got a text message from a political campaign that really resonated with you, we did it. If it made you really annoyed, hopefully we didn't. But either way, talk to me after the event. We're happy to promote the work you do to make sure that the right communication reaches the right people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Armand, and thank you for now I'm going to turn the mic over to Nancy Tong, who will introduce the candidates, our moderator, from the ground rules, format for the debate, and then we'll get started.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Nancy Tong. I'm the Vice President of External Communications for the Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club. So happy to see all of you here tonight. And why don't you all give yourselves a big round of applause, because this is what democracy is. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, so if you want to share that on social media, you can. We all are also creating the hashtag SFD6Debate. So if you want to share on social media, hashtag SFD6Debate. So ground rules. We know that some of you have your favorite candidates. Most of you are probably undecided about this race. So with respect to everybody who is spending their time here today, both in the audience and up here as our moderators and our candidates, please refrain from holding up signs, blocking people's views, yelling or shouting in agreement or disagreement. What I'd like to ask you to do is just do happy hands if you agree. If you are model Tyra at the front, happy hands. If you disagree, you can do a thumbs down. Okay, so everybody, let's try that. Everybody, happy hands. All right, and thumbs down. Great. You guys are quick steady. Okay, so our format tonight, we're going to have opening statements from each of the candidates, and then we will move to questions that have been curated from each of the host clubs and the Tenderloin Housing Clinic and the representative groups. And then we will have questions from the audience. So if you have a question, we ask that you write it down on an index card. If you need an index card, we are floating around with volunteers handing out index cards and pens. So go ahead, raise your hand if you want an index card for a question, and we will get you a card. When you're done writing that, hold the card up in the air, and we will collect it from you. After that, we have a section of the debate that we like to call candidates after candidates. So each of the candidates will have an opportunity to direct a question, more if we have time, but to any one of the other two candidates who are sitting up here tonight. After that, 2 minutes of closing statements, and then we are done for the evening. Hopefully you are better informed as a voter and will be able to make a decision about who to vote for in November. Also, we have voter registration both in English and Spanish, and if you need translation services, again, we have 2 translators on staff to do that. Now, the candidates from your left to right, we have Matt Haney. Okay, this is the last time we're going to clap your hands together. So you can applaud for the introductions. Happy hands out. Thanks. Christine Johnson. Sonja Trauss. And then we have our moderator, who many of you will be familiar with from his 37 years as a San Francisco Chronicle columnist and newspaper reporter. He's covered the Super Bowl, many sporting events, World Series, and has covered a lot of issues at City Hall regarding homelessness. He has retired from the Chronicle, but is now a columnist for the Santa Rosa Press Democrat and is working on a one-man show. Would you please all welcome C.W. Nevius.
Thank you. I wasn't the Chronicle for 37 years, but I started when I was 12. So. I'd like to second what Nancy says about the turnout. This is sensational. Whatever insanity is going on in the White House, we know that real politics takes place locally.
San Francisco.
It's great to see everyone here. We're so glad to have it happen. We're going to start with opening statements. We're going to try to close this out at 8:15, so around 8:05 we'll have time for closing statements. I'll have some questions. We'll have some questions. I think we're going to have a great time. Let's start with Sonja. Opening statements.
Hey! No more clap. Hi, guys.
Nope.
How about now?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, thank you so much, everybody. I want to start out thanking everybody for caring about local politics. Local politics is definitely the venue where you can make the most difference. My name is Sonja Trauss. I'm running for District 6. I live in Western SoMa. Is there anybody here who lives in Western SoMa? Raise your hands. Hello, Western SoMa. Thank you for making it all the way down here from Western SoMa. There's no good public transit way of doing that. I'm running for the Board of Supervisors because this district needs an advocate, an activist at City Hall to represent our interests. The situation in our district is out of control. It has gotten so bad. There are needles on the street, poop on the street, glass from cars getting broken into. This is personal for me. I have an 8-month-old, and in less than a year, he's going to be walking, and I want to be able to walk down the street without being afraid that he's going to pick up a needle, you know? So we have to ask ourselves, why is it this bad? How did things get this bad? It's this bad because our current supervisor, for her, we really weren't a priority. She was running for statewide office the entire time that she was on board. So let me take homelessness for example. We can solve homelessness, but in order to do it, we need a citywide solution. We need somebody at the board that's not going to be afraid to tell the other districts that they need to build shelter and housing also. So I have experience getting things done all over the city. I helped the YIMBY movement that I helped build. We helped pass the Affordable Housing Bonus Program. I'm really proud of it. And I think that I can get things done for this district. Thank you.
Let's go to Christine.
All right. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I grew up in a working class family. My mom was a nurse who worked 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough. Every 2 years, we would get a rent increase and we'd have to move. So I had 8 different home addresses from ages 0 to 18. And I decided early on that I wanted to dedicate my life and my career to making cities a place where everybody can live. I graduated with a degree in engineering and landed on Treasure Island in 2004, and I got to work. I built a 14-year career in public finance and nearly equal amount of time in public service. I was in the Hunters Point Shipyard CAC, the successor to the Redevelopment Agency Commission. I was the first chair, and I was on the Planning Commission until just this past February. I have done all of that work to get, basically, I didn't want to get a PhD in engineering, but I ended up with one in how do you build communities? How do you build multi-purpose buildings with office, with small businesses, with affordable housing, where you have mixed income, true mixed income communities? How do you get transit? And how do you build all of that out of nothing in the case of Mission Bay, or in the case of Hunters Point Shipyard, or in the case of Treasure Island? I have had some successes in that 14 years. I wrote and passed legislation to build more child care facilities in our more dense districts, like District 6. I have approved tens of thousands of units of housing, and I pushed for better transit. But now I live in Mission Bay with my husband and my 2-year-old son, and I've realized nobody's going to care about any of that if you're stepping over poop and needles and you feel like the city can't take care of people who are living in the streets, and you feel like you won't even be living here next year because housing is unaffordable and you can't make your life here. So I'm running because we have a real opportunity to work with our budget, to change our codes, to actually change our the experience of our life on the streets so that people will care about the future of this city. So I hope we are going to have some great conversation tonight. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, Christine. Let's go to Matt.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Haney. I also want to thank all the hosts and everybody who came out tonight. I grew up here in the Bay Area in a family that was committed to public service. My mom is here, who raised me, who spent her life as a children's health advocate. My grandparents, who are 90 and 89, still live in the city and were close confidants of Martin Luther King. My sister is here, who's a public defender. I was taught that we have a responsibility to fight to make our communities better. And so my entire career, I have fought for kids and families here in the city of San Francisco. I have been a school board president and still serve on the school board. I've worked as an eviction defense attorney. I've worked for the last 4 years alongside Van Jones, starting and working for criminal justice reform nationally. And I worked on the Obama campaign in the Obama White House. I live in this city. The first place that I lived in San Francisco was in the Tenderloin. And I see firsthand the challenges that our district is facing every single day. The lack of affordable housing, the thousands of people who are living on our streets, the dirty, the filthy streets and sidewalks. Our district deserves someone who is laser focused on these problems. For too long in San Francisco, we've got caught up in this, are you a moderator, are you a progressive, what are the small differences between us? What we need for District 6 is not someone who talks about it, but is a doer. That is the person that I've been in my entire career. We talked about a school admission bank. I actually fought for it with the people in this room, and we're getting it done. We talked about building teacher housing for years, and finally, when I was president of the school board, it's moving forward. We're going to get it done. I am going to be laser focused as District 6 Supervisor on our neighborhood challenges, getting folks off the street and into navigation centers and housing, cleaning up our streets, which are some of the dirtiest, not just in the city, but in the country and the world, and building housing here in District 6. We can have a great, livable, brilliant community for the diversity of residents who are here if we have a leader who is focused on the residents first. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Let's go to our first question. This was provided by someone else, and they make the point that District 6 may be the most diverse district in the city. We go from the poverty, the problems in the Tenderloin, to the affluence of gentrification in Mission Bay. The question is, and we'll start with Christine, in 5 years, how will this district change, and what demographics will be most affected?
Well, in 5 years, sorry, don't start my time yet. In 5 years, we are going to have a continued sea change. Many of you probably voted for a ballot measure to improve Seawall Lot 337A, which is the parking lot right behind Giant Stadium. So we're going to continue to have lots of new development. The Central SoMa plan is going through the Board of Supervisors right now, and that's going to be a change in where businesses are and where people live. So we're going to continue to have more density and more residents than any other part of the city for a good long time. Who is that going to impact? Well, that's going to impact the residents in affordable housing today. And the way that we are going to make sure that our neighborhoods can be mixed income, even as we welcome new residents, is to make sure we do small site acquisition, to make sure we clarify our inclusionary housing legislation so that our lottery system isn't opaque and unfair anymore, and that we return the management of the streets back to the city so that the city has accountability for making sure that there's no poop, no needles, that our sidewalks are passable, and that everybody is able to live their lives in San Francisco. So there's going to continue to be more people, but we got to make sure that we keep everyone here even as we welcome new people.
Thank you, Matt.
You know, I think sometimes in San Francisco we get caught up in this newcomers, natives divide. It can be a bit of a distraction. Everybody who lives in our city and everybody who lives in this district deserves to have a great neighborhood, a clean and safe community, and access to housing. The people who live here right now have to be protected first and foremost. We need stronger tenant protections. We need to overturn Costa-Hawkins and actually make sure that we can expand rent control. We have to make sure that we expand our small sites program so that folks who are in danger of displacement have protection. We have to fund universal access to counsel. Right now, folks living here are getting squeezed. People in District 6 feel rents that are skyrocketing. At the same time as we're creating thousands of new jobs, we're not building enough housing. So I'm going to be focused on building housing in District 6, finding the sites, making the deals, and making sure as we build more jobs here, that we're also building enough housing for the people who come here. But I'm also going to make sure that the people who live here are protected. This has to be a top priority. We cannot see the level of displacement that we've seen in our district. We have to fight for the residents at the same time as we build enough housing for the new folks who are coming in. Everybody who lives in District 6 deserves to have a high quality, beautiful, clean, safe neighborhood and access to housing. And I think that's going to be a top responsibility of the next supervisor.
Over the last 10 years, District 6 built 60% of the city's housing. In one district, there are 10 other districts. If you put 6 and 10 together, those two districts built 80% of the city's housing. And that's 80% of the city's housing, market rate, and below market rate. In the next 5 years, we are going to continue to build more housing. My hope is that we have some of the other districts also start to add population. Because it's, first of all, it's unfair. Second of all, it's just not sustainable to focus 100% of our development almost in just a couple of districts. It's not fair to people who qualify for affordable housing. You know, they might want to live in somewhere near the beach. You know, people want to live in all different neighborhoods. All of the neighborhoods should have a place for every type of person to live. I truly believe in integrating San Francisco economically and racially. So hopefully in the next 5 years, the Affordable Housing Bonus Program will really see some results. I'm also going to propose legalizing affordable housing everywhere in San Francisco, because right now it's only legal in 20% of the city. This is something that really surprises people. And what we have to do here is play catch up. Because even though the city planned for a lot of new people to live here, which is great, I live here, right, we all live here, they really didn't plan for all the things that we need. For instance, a school. Why did we need to start fighting for the school after the housing was finished? That school should have opened when the housing opened. Everyone knew that those people were going to be there when the housing opened. Same thing with transit. The city is really backwards on transit. Our roads are still built for highway off-ramps and light manufacturing, and we have to turn our streets into places that are built for people. Thanks.
Thanks, Sonja. Here's a question right from the news. Just recently, the American Medical Association announced it would no longer hold a convention here because of the conditions on the streets. That's a loss to San Francisco of $40 million. What can you, as a candidate, do to assure and improve the condition of our streets? Let's start with Matt.
The conditions on our streets are absolutely shameful. You walk down the street, there's poop, there's needles, there's trash, and the reality is that there are things that are accepted, apparently, in District 6 that nowhere else in the city would anyone have to deal with. And it's critical for the next District 6 supervisor to actually stand up and say, enough is enough. I live in the Tenderloin, and if you walk around and you actually see the neighborhood through the eyes of the children who have to walk to parks, who have to walk to schools, it's really a statement of who we value and who we care about. So there's a couple things that I think that we need to do. First thing is that we need to actually have the deep daily sidewalk and street cleaning that meets the needs in our neighborhood. If you walk on our streets, especially in the morning, especially on the weekend, and you see when there hasn't been street cleaning, it's a total mess. It's completely unacceptable, and we need to fight for the resources. Recently, the city hired 44 new street cleaners. Instead of actually putting 44 where they're needed in our district, they put 4 in each district. And I think that's not equity. It's not meeting the needs that we have in our district. We also need to make sure that we have more public restrooms. So many of the people who need to use the restroom don't have access to one. And we need to double the number of public restrooms that we have just in our district alone. I also think that there needs to be some accountability. Right now, there's no one who's actually responsible to keep our streets clean. It goes under DPW, who has a ton of other responsibilities. We need some real accountability. We need data to show where the trash is. We need an adequate number of trash cans and actually have some accountability for that in our neighborhood. You can walk blocks in our district and not find a single trash can in a place where we have more trash than anywhere else. The person who represents this district, which I'm asking to be, has to make this a top priority. To have our clean streets, that is a basic foundation for our community, and I will fight for it.
The dirtiness on the street is not ordinary street dirtiness. It's not bubblegum and fast food wrappers. The dirtiness on our street is because people are living on our streets. I'm honestly amazed by this answer. Because what Matt is saying, he's not saying that we should attack the root problem. He's not saying that the people that are sleeping on the street deserve to sleep inside in a shelter. What he's saying is, people are sleeping on the street, well, let's bring them a bathroom on the street. I have a better idea. Let's build enough shelter and housing that everyone can sleep inside. And it is possible. Politicians in this town frequently immediately will change the subject. You ask them about the homelessness, and you ask them about the conditions that the homelessness causes, and then they want to switch and say, well, let's talk about getting DPW to come out more often. And that's because they've given up. And a lot of San Franciscans have given up too. A lot of San Franciscans believe that we cannot shelter people. But I'm telling you, hundreds of other American cities have done it. In many American cities, 98% of people who are homeless are nonetheless at least sheltered. This is true in Philadelphia, DC, Boston, New York, Salt Lake City, the list goes on. So we can do it too, we just have to decide to do it. And we have to make some potentially uncomfortable decisions in order to do it. We have to make it a priority, even if that means losing votes in other neighborhoods. And I promise you, that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you. So on this one, talking about bubble gum on the street, we need to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to be able to provide places for people to be during the day, whether they're unhoused or whether they live in an SRO and have nowhere to go during the day, so they post up on the street on a stool or a chair because that's their living room. We need to find places for those people to go that is indoor and outdoor recreational space that is okay for adults to be in. The other thing we need to do is change our laws. I wrote a Medium post about this and posted it a couple weeks ago. Does everyone know that if you walk down the street in the morning and you've ever seen a person without a uniform with a hose spraying the street, that's a failure of our city policy. If you ever see a garbage can that says sponsored by XYZ CBD, and by the way, I love CBDs, King benefit districts, that's a failure of our policy. We have a line in our administrative code that says that private property owners are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the sidewalk side of their property. Well, it's my position that the government, the city of San Francisco, should maintain our public space, and that includes our sidewalks. The first piece of legislation that I would work on when I'm supervisor is to change that line in our code so that we can truly make the city accountable. There's no way that I'm going to be able to answer to you if you ask me, why aren't the streets clean yet? And I'll tell you some answer. How can you hold me accountable if technically the person who owns the building is supposed to keep the sidewalk clean? That doesn't make any sense. So once we change that, then we can have discussions about what's the budget for DPW, what is the budget in the capital plan for trash cans, for more street cleaning infrastructure, for more pit stops. Those things are all in our capital plan, but we can't do it if the city doesn't have true accountability. And again, we also need to find places for people to be during the day so they're not just out on the sidewalk, living their lives out there. We want our sidewalks to be public spaces for all of us.
Very good, thank you. Here's a question from the audience. What will you do to keep families in San Francisco? And the second part of the question is, especially with the insane school assignment process. So, you start with that? You start with that?
The first thing we need is actually more schools, like flat out more schools. We've underbuilt schools, and especially in the East Cut area and Mission Bay. We also need more housing. A lot of people are leaving really because of affordability. I myself, I live with my husband, we live in a one-bedroom, we have a baby, I would like to have another baby. At some point, we're gonna wanna live in a two-bedroom. And is that two-bedroom gonna exist for us? So my work with the YIMBY movement has always been about building more housing so we have more room for more different types of people, and without a doubt, that includes families. The school assignment system, the point of it is to increase integration in the schools. But actually, it turns out that probably hasn't worked. So at this point, since the schools aren't any more integrated than they would be otherwise, and also the school assignment system means people are commuting all over the city and it's very convenient for them, it makes sense to rethink it. But ultimately, that's really the responsibility of the Board of Supervisors. The things that I can do to keep families in the city are about ensuring that there's affordable housing for people, ensuring that there are amenities for families, like parks that we want to go to and want to use, and things like that.
Thank you. As a mom with a 2-year-old, at a school assignment process terrifies me. I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I want to focus on what I can do as District 6 Supervisor. A few years back, the Office of Economic and Workforce Development put together a study on what they can do to help African American families stay in San Francisco. And I think the findings apply to everybody. The top 3 answers were more childcare, as in 0 to 5, more housing, especially housing with more than 1 bedroom, family-size housing, and more middle-class jobs. Those were the 3 top things that you need to be able to support a family in San Francisco, and then you can care about open space, safer streets, all the things that make a neighborhood livable. So when it comes to childcare, I've already helped pass legislation to help build childcare facilities in dense urban districts. Our laws before that in both the city and the state were written as if childcare was in a 1-room schoolhouse in the middle of a field, not in areas with taller buildings and multi-use buildings. So we've changed that, but we still have more work to do, and I'm ready to push that. We need more housing, and we need to build more so that there's opportunities for more 2 and 3 bedrooms. It's really hard to fit in 2 and 3 bedrooms when you're only saying a building can be this high and this wide. We got to find more opportunities for housing. And then, finally, with middle-class jobs, I strongly support small business. I've done a ton of work to make sure that entrepreneurs and small business owners can make sure to be open in these vacant spaces and be successful in San Francisco, because they are the ones who are providing the middle-class and working-class jobs. So if we do those 3 things, it gets a whole lot easier to keep families in San Francisco.
I think if you walk down here into this neighborhood in Mission Bay, you're going to see a lot of families. You're going to see a lot of strollers. But many of those families feel like they have to move when they get a bit older, when the kids get older. And I think that this is a huge problem in our district, to be able to actually plan to live here over the long term. One of the things that I've fought for during my time on the school board with many people in this room is actually to bring the first new school that we built in San Francisco, which will be here in Mission Bay, in over 15 years. I think that we need to plan ahead. We need to be looking ahead. And we need to not just build a new school in Mission Bay, we need to be thinking about other parts of our district. Treasure Island, over here, certainly the city more generally. If you are raising a family in the Tenderloin or in SoMa, there are many families in the Tenderloin. I live in a building where all of my neighbors have small kids. And when it hits the evening, or even on a weekend, they don't have anywhere to go play but in the hallway. And we have a park that's literally right on the corner of where I live. And they can't go and play there. And they've been waiting for years and years, and I want to thank Labos and the folks who've been working to try to change that and actually address the fact that we don't have enough safe and clean open space in our district. We have the least amount of open space of anywhere, of any of the districts. And that's something that needs to change if we're going to be a family-friendly city. And then we've talked about it in this question around, can we also address homelessness and address clean streets? Absolutely. Our families require us to do that. Many of the families in our district say that they won't let their kids go out and play because they have to walk through not just needles on the ground and trash, but also drug dealing. And we have to ensure safety for our families as well. So these things are connected, they're interconnected, and we have to make sure that this is a family-friendly city from the Tenderloin down here and think ahead about the future.
Thank you. I'm going to editorialize a little bit. One of the things we talk about all the time is homelessness. And one of my pet peeves is it's not a one-size-fits-all problem. We've got many different types of homeless problems. I'd like to focus particularly on one, the kind of person that we've all seen who is floridly mentally ill, who is unbalanced, who is on the street, and we seem unable to get help for those people, to get them off the street. And I'd like to know if the candidates have a suggestion for a program or a plan that would do something to get the people who so desperately need that help are on our streets and get them some help and off our streets.
Absolutely, this is personal to me. I have an aunt who has been institutionalized since she was 11. I have another aunt who is severely mentally ill, and when she stops taking her medication, she ends up doing things like running down Queens Boulevard naked and being 5150 to Bellevue. So this is very personal to me. Mental illness is not any different than a physical illness. I mean, if someone were dragging themselves down the street with a broken leg, you would find an ambulance and put that person inside. We have movements both in our local and state. Mayor London Breed, State Senator Scott Wiener have been working on conservatorship laws, and I fully agree with them. I want to also note that the problems that we see, it is a minor part of what we see on our streets. The number of people who cycle in and out of our emergency care systems, who are severely mentally ill, endanger themselves and others, is sub 50. It's a very small amount of people. But for those people, we need help. And to get that, conservatorship requires two things. One, we need to have a good system in place. Right now, our county jail is our mental health facility. And we need to make sure that people have rights even as they end up in that situation where they're already in jail. And so I want to make sure that we are very clear on that process and people continue to have their rights. The second thing is conservatorship requires supportive housing. The whole point is that someone is concerned and then they are put into a housing facility where there's services for up to a year where they can then, you can titrate on medications, you can get better. Well, we need to find those facilities. We got 50 beds, 54 beds at St. Mary's Hospital, but we need to, not hospital beds, we need actual supportive housing, and we need to make sure it gets built. I'm going to definitely push for it to get built in San Francisco. We might even have some opportunities in the Central SoMa project, and looking forward to helping those people who are living in hell on our streets today.
It's a complete shame that in a city as wealthy as ours, that we literally have people walking around in their hospital clothes, who are sick, who are clearly unable to take care of themselves. I live in the Tenderloin. I see people on my block directly across the street from a shelter, living on the street in their hospital clothes. And it's an absolute shame of our city. I think that we need to actually have real pathways for people to get the help that they need, not just leave them out on their own. We have a system that works to actually connect people to services called the Navigation Center. We need to stop waiting and stop the slow process of actually building more navigation centers and build a navigation center in every single supervisor district in our city. We also need to look at the shelters that we have. Right now, our shelter system, as well as our mental health system, is completely broken. So if you go into a shelter and you need mental health services, good luck actually getting it. The caseload there is hundreds for one person, and there's not an incentive to actually get people on the right path to get them the help that they need. What I will focus on, what I will get done, is actually transforming our shelter system to be more like our navigation center system. To actually transform them to navigation centers so that you can get help on site, get referred to support, and actually have case management instead of just the cycle of putting people out on the street to fend for themselves. The third thing is that we need to have treatment on demand for folks who need it. If we don't have the capacity right now to do it in our city, we need to actually work with folks in our region. We need to make sure that we're partnering with other cities who have capacity. Right now, a 24-hour hold on someone who just obviously needs deep mental health care support is completely unacceptable, and as supervisor, I will fight to change that.
Running for supervisor, I have the opportunity to talk to all kinds of people. And one of the things that I've learned from people who are living on the streets, living in shelters, is that a lot of what we look at and think is mental illness is actually people high on meth. And I think that that's a really interesting and important thing. The new conservatorship law will help with that. Because currently, as it is, if you are taken in 5150 because you're high on meth, and you come down after 2 days, they let you go. But the new definition in the conservatorship law is a bigger definition. If you keep coming back, if you clearly have a drug addiction that is destroying your life, then that is now a clue that maybe you are not making good decisions for yourself. So I'm optimistic about that. The Coalition on Homelessness has a really exciting ballot measure that is very, very ambitious, and I encourage everybody to learn about it and vote for it and talk to your friends about it, because it will raise taxes on some of the biggest corporations and spend money on housing, mental health services, shelter, and homelessness prevention. That's something that we really need. I talked earlier about giving up hope, When I talk to people and I tell them about this ballot measure, and I say, we need to move forward and do this ballot measure, we need to build shelter, we need to build the kinds of services that people need, I cannot tell you how many different types of people tell me it's impossible and that there's no point. So please, if you believe it's worth it, tell the people you know. I talk to people who live in SROs who tell me there's no point in trying to end homelessness. Nothing about a person's demographic gives me a clue about whether they have hope that this is a solvable problem or not. So please tell your friends, I think together we can do it.
Thank you. So today, I had an appointment at the Mission. At about 4 o'clock, I had to drive back to Mission Bay. And it took me 45 minutes. People who live in this neighborhood keep a giant schedule handy whether they follow the team or not, because you have to know what the traffic's going to be like. In the fall of 2019, the Warriors Arena is going forward. I have a two-part question for the candidates. Did you support the Warriors Arena? And what will you do to make sure traffic doesn't overwhelm this area?
Well, I think anybody who worked their way over here from somewhere would say that traffic has already overwhelmed this area and it's a huge problem. You know, we are a world-class city, but we don't have a world-class public transportation system. We have a situation where there are big projects which we've been talking about, which we know are needed, have not been funded and have not been prioritized. We have service problems where you can be waiting for the bus and see 3 buses that are full go right by you. And we have an awful situation with congestion in our city, especially down here when there's a game and sometimes when there's not a game. And this neighborhood is really bearing the brunt of that challenge. As a school board member, one of the things that we really worked on is how to be able to get folks to school on time. Because you're traveling across the city and you're getting caught in traffic every day. It's a huge challenge that I've worked a lot on to prioritize, to make sure that we're working with the city, we're working with community to get folks to school on time. There's a couple things that I think that we need to do differently. One is that we need to actually have better planning that takes into consideration the role of ride sharing. Right now, you can have big projects that go up that don't even consider the fact that thousands of people who live there are taking ride sharing. And the regulation and oversight of ride sharing needs to be improved. We also need to actually have big ideas and big projects. Right now, the downtown extension needs to actually happen. We need to be able to get Caltrain to the Trans Bay. And the fact that we don't have the funding and the planning yet to do that is a huge problem. We need a second BART tube. We need to make sure we have subway going out to the west side. These are the plans that we need to be focused on if we're going to address congestion over the long term here. And again, the congestion in this area, we need better enforcement. We need folks out there who are managing traffic. If you're driving down here, it's like a free-for-all. We need alternatives to transportation, but we also need to make sure that we actually have some better planning and control on what's happening in our streets.
Why did you drive from the Mission to Mission Bay? I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but this is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Sometimes we're in the car and we say, traffic is the problem. Well, maybe the problem was you didn't look up and see what your other alternatives are. There are people that are always going to have to drive, and I'm going to tell you something. We drove here tonight. And the entire time we were in bumper-to-bumper traffic, and it was my own fault. You know, I could have done something different. There are people who can't drive, and for those of us who can take the bus or a scooter or a bike, do not take a car if you have another option. So my vision for this district is to make it more appealing to get out of our cars and to clue people in to other options when they maybe didn't realize we had them. The most efficient way of getting humans from one place to another, from point A to point B, is actually a sidewalk, the simple sidewalk. In any given time period, a sidewalk can carry 6 times as many people as a lane of traffic. So we have tens of thousands of new people in this area. We have to think about that and optimize the parts of the street that are really efficient. We also have to build protected bike lanes so people want to bike and scooter. Red lanes, so that when you do want to take a bus, it's fast and reliable. In the short term, I'm a huge supporter. I want to bring resources to this part of the city to have police officers enforcing don't block blocks. That is going to help a lot. It's really, really, really important. We have to do it. Also, as we take space away from cars and hand it over to people-powered transport, I want to get this fancy system that LA has with timed lights. It is so nice, you guys. Look it up. Timed lights, LA. It's going to be a breeze. You'll love it.
Thank you, Sonja. I'm glad you put me on the spot. Christina.
Thank you. I'm not going to put you on the spot because the problem with traffic for the Giants Stadium and for the Warriors Arena is with people who don't live around there, right? So that is what we need to be talking about. And I'm going to answer both parts of your questions. I supported the Warriors Arena being here. I actually, although they both represent challenges, the site on 16th and 3rd is way better than the site on Pier 3032. I mean, we weren't getting there unless like Elon Musk was going to, invent teleportation or something. That's how we were going to get there. So what can we do? The first thing we need to do is we need to have congestion pricing for our city. That is how we are going to make sure that we are truly pricing for how we get for the cars on our streets. What else can we do beyond that? We need to push for the plans we already have in Mission Bay. We need to make sure that we open our streets on time. So for example, the 3045, which starts right now at Caltree, the plan was for it to go all the way to Potrero Hill. But we haven't done it because we haven't finished opening the streets. We need to make sure that the water transit that is planned for the area, that's going to go to Treasure Island, Alameda, Warriors around San Francisco, actually happens. People will use it. I can assure you that they will use it, and you will not even be able to remember the time before it. For our current streets, we need to make sure, we just had an article in the news, in the Chronicle just the other day, about how, or the Examiner rather, I'm sorry, the switchback for the T-line in front of the arena, how it's going to cost more money. There shouldn't be a switchback. It should continue all the way down so that we have opportunities to bring people from both the north and the south part of the city to get to the arena and to get the Giants Stadium. If we do those things, and also if we make more parking opportunities in our private parking facilities where residents don't own cars, you've got empty parking lots in some of these buildings around here, then we will find a way to reduce traffic on our street, get people to these stadiums and arenas, and make this a world-class international destination in its own mission.
Thank you. Well, speaking of transportation, a few months ago, a bunch of electric scooters appeared on our streets. And people seemed to like them. They were everywhere. All of us, I'm sure, were almost run over at different times on the sidewalk. But it also seemed like, with some tweaking, a reasonable solution to transportation. How do you make something like that safe? How do you regulate it? And how do you make it work for this city?
I'm a strong supporter of scooters in the bike lane. I found out on Twitter that is controversial. Some people yelled at me. Scooters belong in the bike lane. I understand that some people felt like a private company was using public space, and it is a problem for the scooters and the bikes to be strewn all over. I really believe that it's a solvable problem. And cars privatize public space too. People park their cars sometimes on the sidewalk, but they expect free parking on curbside. So that's kind of neither here nor there for me. The scooters and the bikes, the same thing. I do think that most people really like them. Scooting is a gateway drug to biking, and I think it should encourage people to do it. I talked about before how these are both great alternatives to Lyft and Uber. If you want to see less Lyft and Ubers on the road, you want to see more scooters and bikes. So we should lift the cap on the number of bikes and scooters. Because what happens right now is that because they can only deploy so many in the city, they're all only deployed in the eastern neighborhoods, and the flat areas on the west side where there's a lot of people that really want to use that type of transportation and a lot of opportunity to get people out of their cars, they don't have access to that, and that's not fair.
So I like all ways of getting around. I bike, I walk, I take transit.
So I'm supportive of any way to get around, especially ones that get people out of their automobiles. I have friends actually who own those electric scooters for years, and nobody cares about them until they were sort of strewn all over our streets. The number one problem we have is that our streets are not designed for infrastructure that nobody owns, right? Well, remember, there were actually fights to get bike parking on our sidewalks some years ago, and that was a challenge. Now imagine something that's not even like, I care about my own bike not getting stolen. It's just, it doesn't appear to belong to anybody. So we need to redesign our streets so that they can accommodate things like bike share across the street and scooters, infrastructure that nobody owns. We also need to make sure that we have a full bike lane network. I agree, scooters should be in the bike lanes. And if we had a full bike lane network, then people would be there. And I also think that beyond that, we need to make sure that these companies, whether there's 1, 2, 3, or 10 of them, not 10, that'd be a lot, but that they are integrated with our public transit. We should require that they have to use Clipper systems so that people can use Clipper for Muni, for scooters, for those uni-wheel things, for all of that. And I think if we do those things, people will feel much better about these alternatives to just traditional bicycle or mass transit or walking on our streets. But we need to design our streets for it, and I think we can do it.
So we absolutely have too many cars on our streets. I think people who live in this neighborhood experience that. It's causing tremendous congestion. It's not safe to pedestrians or to bicyclists. It's a huge challenge to get around the city. It actually makes it hard for us to have a great public transportation system if every time the Uni's trying to stop, they get caught up in traffic. So we need to have a plan to get folks out of cars, walking, biking, and using alternatives. I think there's a right way to do it. I rode over here on a scoot, which is a little bit of a different type of thing, but I'm a huge fan of scoot, and I think that there are ways that we can do this in the right way. Those scooters that you talked about, I heard that they're actually coming back, and it shouldn't be done this way. It shouldn't happen when a bunch come out on the street and the city reacts and there's a fight. There has to actually be a process for emerging technologies, including transportation, where we actually work together and we partner and we get things out on the street that need to get on the street. Right now, if you are trying to do an alternative, it's very difficult to work with the city. Our city should be a hub for innovation, for partnership, to actually get things done together. If we're a place of innovation for our companies, the city should also be an innovator as well. The other thing that I want to talk about is Market Street. A lot of those scooters were on Market Street. And in reality, Market Street should have been revamped and transformed decades ago. It is absolutely shameful that we don't have a world-class thoroughfare in our city because we haven't made the transportation and sidewalk improvements that need to be made. Market Street is a place where a lot of people go and turn around. It should actually be a place where people go to, where scooters have access, alternative forms of transportation, our buses can go quickly and easily. So all of those things will be a priority, not just to be an innovator in our companies like this one here, but an innovator as a city working together in partnership to address one of our biggest challenges, which is getting cars off the street.
Thank you. One more transportation question. And it is difficult to get around San Francisco on the city streets. But one of the things that we found at the Chronicle was Lyft and Uber have become a wonderful innovation. But we've often got as many as 60,000 cars driving the streets of San Francisco. And it's important to remember, they're not going point A to point B. They're circling, they're cruising, they're cutting in front of you, they're stopping on the street. What is the proper role for ride-sharing operations? And how should they be controlled or administered?
So I want to focus on that 60,000 car per day number. In 2010, San Francisco wrote a climate action plan, and they talked about strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Ride sharing was on there. It was one of the strategies that people said to get people out of their personal automobiles. 5 years later, when they did the update to the climate change action plan, it was no longer on there because we were finding that greenhouse gas emissions in personal automobiles, which is generally speaking what drivers of Uber and Lyft use, were going up. And part of that is because they're adding cars to our road, more so than what's even in San Francisco. The number one thing we can do is congestion pricing. If we do that, we can still have these services on our streets without clogging our roadways with well-meaning and sometimes lovely drivers, but they come from Sacramento because they get bonuses to drive in urban areas where they can get more rides per day. And I want to support, middle-class families in Sacramento as much as the next person, but we have to make sure that we are actually getting people out of their automobiles. We have less cars on our street, and we're making sure that we are raising the revenue for the wear and tear on the infrastructure that we have. So I think if we do that, then we can move on to other discussions about especially enforcement of our current parking and traffic law. We don't need new laws, we need to enforce the ones we have. And if we do that, we will have a better experience on our streets, and I truly believe that we can integrate these services into our transportation system and how we get everybody, not just around District 6, but around the city.
I think we've had a planning department that has completely failed us on this issue. And City Hall has completely failed us in actually planning for the situation that we have now. And we know that some of these rideshare companies have a lot of influence in City Hall. And the reality is that they haven't been adequately regulated. And our neighborhoods are feeling that. There are places all over this area here where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Ubers and Lyfts are coming in and blocking cars, but also blocking buses, blocking bikes, and making it dangerous for pedestrians. It is the city's responsibility to keep our streets safe. As supervisor, I am committed to that and putting the residents first, not the companies first. The reality is that we need to have access to their data so we know how many of these drivers are coming in and where they are and how much they're getting paid. The city actually has to force them to share that data. The second thing is we know that through geofencing that we can actually ensure that they're not breaking the law. So if a car is coming in and out of a bike lane, or if it's picking up in huge numbers in areas where it's currently illegal, we should be able to stop that. And we should work with the companies to actually get that done. We need enforcement and regulation, but we also need a plan for this. When there's a new building that's going up here, we can assume that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to use Uber and Lyft. Where are those pickups happening? Where do we want them to happen? How do we actually work for what's best for our residents, not what's best for the companies? They're going to be a part of the transportation infrastructure here. They're not going away. That's not what I'd be calling for. I'm calling for actually putting the needs of our residents and neighborhoods first through smart planning, which our planning department has not done, and through adequate regulation and enforcement, which is not happening now.
Well, the city can't regulate the Ubers and Lyfts the way they want because the state regulates taxis and Uber and Lyft. And this is something that I think really frustrates City Hall, but it's not City Hall's fault. It is true. According to data released by the County Transportation Agency, 25% of cars in our central business district are Uber or Lyft. That's huge. I encourage everybody to look at the maps that the CTA put up of pickups and drop-offs. I thought, when I looked at those, that what I was going to see were commuter maps. A lot of drop-offs I don't know why I thought that. I know you're shaking your head, and you're right, I never thought that. It's not that at all. It's pickups and drop-offs pretty steady throughout the day, all around Union Square. So to me, what that says is that we need to work with the hotels. I think a lot of Uber and Lyft use is tourists, and that makes a lot of sense because when you don't know your way around at all, and you hear this terrible reputation about walking around, and probably the hotels are encouraging people to get an Uber and Lyft because they don't really want them walking around. Then you call an Uber or Lyft, not realizing that you're going to be stuck in traffic and it's not going to be that great of an experience. So the number one thing I want to do first is see how much progress we can make working with the hotels to help them. I mean, tourism is our number one industry here in San Francisco. So we have to work with the hotels, and if it's a lot of tourists, then maybe we can make a big difference.
All right, let's go to another topic, a little controversial, takes a little explaining. In November, California voters are going to vote for Proposition 10. This is to repeal the rent control initiative, Coleman-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. That act says cities cannot enact rent control on dwellings make sure I get this right, they were occupied after 1995. So newer buildings are not subject to rent control. And secondly, once someone moves out, landlords are allowed to move the rent to market rate. This would repeal that. It's caused a huge controversy on both sides. People who oppose the idea of repealing it say it will shrink the housing stock. People who are in favor of it say it will help those who cannot no longer afford to stay in a city like San Francisco. What's your opinion of Proposition 10 and the repeal of Coleman Harbors?
So, we have some of the highest, if not the highest rents in the country here in San Francisco. And for anyone who's here who doesn't live in a rent-controlled apartment, you are always at the threat that you may be displaced, that your rent can go up at any rate that your landlord wants. And in some cases, we know that they go up 30, 50% in a single year. We have a situation in our city where we have some of the highest rents, and we also have a lot of speculation. In the Tenderloin, there's a lot of buildings that have been purchased with the goal of pushing people out so you can increase rents and bring in a different set of folks. And that's a huge problem across our district. I've worked with some of these families and tenants as an eviction defense attorney. I've defended people who have been pushed out of our city and who have had the threat of losing their home because of exorbitant rent increases and speculation. So I am in full support of Proposition 10. I will support it, I will campaign for it. We absolutely need to have a conversation and fight for, and I'll do this, I will fight for expanding rent control if we overturn the Costa-Hawkins. I know that you cannot live in this city if you have the threat over your head of a 20, 30, 40% increase in any given year. There is a way to do this. We have to protect the people who are here at the same time as we build more housing. Rent control is one tool to do that. Universal access to council and actually fully funding that measure is another way to do that. And I have the experience to understand the challenges that our tenants are facing, and I will fight to make sure that we protect tenants and that we expand rent control.
We'll see what happens, with the ballot measure. I'm excited about the possibility of extending rent control statewide. This is one of the great things that could happen. Currently, not only is rent control limited, but we have this model that every city decides on its own whether to have rent control or not. And that means that although in San Francisco, only 16% of renters don't have rent control, in many, many cities and localities all over the state, no one has rent control. They are totally unprotected. There are mass evictions happening as close as San Mateo that we can't imagine happening here. So if we can successfully get Costa-Hawkins repealed, what I'm hoping is that then we can take that momentum to do statewide rent control reforms that can affect everybody all at once. And I know that one of my opponents keeps harping on focusing only on this district, but the truth is that the Board of Supervisors is a bully pulpit, and the supervisors can get involved in state politics, and when it's something as high stakes as this, when there's so many tens of thousands of renters all over the state that we can help, I would do everything that we can as the city of San Francisco to extend these protections all over the state.
Thank you. So I definitely knew what Costa-Hawkins was before there was a Prop 10. For years, on the Redevelopment Agency Commission and on the Planning Commission, I've been an advocate for at least amendments to Costa-Hawkins that would roll forward the year when buildings become eligible for rent control. Right now, it's frozen in 1995, so as we go forward, older buildings go away, they're replaced by newer ones, and the whole point was eventually nothing would be rent control. So I have spoken about that to many people, and I'm happy that more of the regular public knows what Costa-Hawkins is today. It's on the ballot. We are going to see what happens in November. I think that this fight will not be won or lost in the Bay Area. It's going to be won or lost in Southern California. So we need to advocate, however you feel, and we hope, we will see where we end up in November. But I'll tell you what I do as supervisor. If it passes, I want to make sure that we put together legislation that solves for the problem we have, which is people feeling unstable in their housing. I actually personally experienced this. I lived on Treasure Island, fine. It's basically rent control, it's like government housing, for like 8-9 years. I've now had 3 different apartments in the last 7 years because I've lived in market rate housing. So I understand this. And whether it's rent control, whether it's strengthened rent control, whether it's other methods, whether it's a vacancy tax, I want to make sure we're solving for people feeling stable in their homes. If it doesn't pass, I still think we can do a vacancy tax. And we need to go beyond Prop F. The current Prop F that passed in June is only for if you're already in eviction proceedings and you're in court. We need to account for when landlords harass tenants. That sort of behavior is very gray area, and Prop F doesn't really cover it. So I think we can do more there regardless of what happens in November.
Thank you. So the late Mayor Lee made a goal to build 5,000 units of housing each year. A two-part question. First, is that about right? Too many, too few? And what percentage of that housing should be inclusionary housing demanded for the development?
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I missed the first part.
So Ed Lee suggested we build 5,000 units of housing a year. Is that about right? Too many, too few? And then what percentage should be inclusionary housing?
I'm so excited to be first on this. This is my issues, my question. 4 years ago, I was a high school math teacher. I wasn't involved in politics at all. But rents were going up, people were getting displaced, and it was obvious it was because there was a shortage, right? Population's growing, people are having kids, the economy's hot, and we just weren't building housing fast enough. In the last 20 years, the average amount of housing we built per year was 1,900 units. In 2015 was the first time that we built more than 4,000 units in the previous 25 years. And then subsequently we built, almost 5,000. So now we have 2-3 years in a row where we are more than 3,000 units. And things actually are already starting to change a little bit. And let me tell you, after building less than 2,000 units a year for 25 years, if we actually built 5,000 units a year every year for 20 years, you better believe the outcome that we get would be very, very different. It would be an affordable place. We would really reduce displacement. So this is what animated all of my activism. And I'm really proud that we have now the YIMBY Party, which has 1,500 members in San Francisco. It makes it the 3rd biggest organization. We're really throwing our weight around. I want to take some credit for Mayor Lee making this goal of 5,000 units a year. 4 years ago, when I started organizing pro-density renters, and the controller said we need 100,000 units, that's what 5,000 a year for 20 years is 100,000 units. He said that as a joke number. He said, obviously we can't do that. And what the YIMBY said, what I said was, let's try, let's do it. And now, it's so much part of the conversation that both of my opponents are also running on a pro-housing platform, and you guys probably heard our new mayor also echo it. We have to stop with the politics of no, we need a politics of yes.
I would just like to say that I was pro-housing before there was a YIMBY Party. I met Sonja when she came to the planning commission and started yelling at me. That's how I met Sonja in the YIMBY Party. So, yes, I'm also happy that our late mayor Ed Lee put a goalpost in the ground, and I think we can do more. I'll tell you, it's not just about new units. Everyone focuses on the new developments, and we need to make sure that we streamline our bureaucracy to actually get that stuff out of the ground. But I'll tell you, nearly 60% of our land mass is covered in single-family homes, and I'll tell you, 60% of our city is not zoned for single-family homes. We have a lot of single-family homes and 2- and 3-unit buildings on lots that were zoned for more. So we need to make sure that we're maximizing the current zoning that we have, even as we get other housing out of the ground. And I can assure you, we can probably beat 5,000 units per year, particularly if we're able to get over the hump of the craziness happening in the shipyard and with Treasure Island and get those built. And so the second part of your question was inclusionary housing. So I am in support of as much as we can get that actually gets housing out of the ground. I don't think a lot of people know how much housing we don't get because developers and or their investment interests say they can't do it, right? And I'm not going to stump for them, but I will say this. We need to use our budget. We need to have a public bank. We need to find ways to help subsidize getting housing and infrastructure out of the ground so that all those projects that you guys have never heard of because they don't even get to the commission because the numbers don't work can happen. And if we do that, we can get really high inclusionary rates in our system. And then I'm just going to end with my one thing that I stand on the soapbox about. Inclusionary is fantastic. It is not the same thing as rent control, so people know. And for those that we have below market rate or inclusionary, we need to clean up our lottery system. It is opaque, unfair. You need professional help to even get into it, and I want to do something about that.
So we haven't built nearly enough housing in our city or in our district. We have, over the last 10 years, about 8 jobs for every 1 unit of housing. It's completely unacceptable, and we have to change it in the future years. But the reality is that, shouting people down and getting these ideological fights or trolling people on Twitter is not going to get housing built. We need somebody who is actually on the ground, getting things done and building housing. When I was the president of the school board, we actually are getting teacher housing built. We've been talking about it for a decade, it's happening. I was the vice chair of the Mission Economic Development Agency board. We have housing that was built that people live in right now, actual real housing. So there are people who I've defended as an eviction defense attorney who live in their housing because I fought for it. So we need people who are actually fighting and getting things done. 5,000 is good. How many of those are going to be affordable? We need to actually be not just rezoning and approving housing. We need to actually make sure this housing is getting built. Housing development's getting held up for years, and many of that housing is not actually what we need for our community. If your housing is being built and it's actually being used as an investment property, how is that actually helping meet our housing needs? So I want to make sure that if we're approving housing, that it's meeting our broader plan. There's a general plan that said that we need to actually be building more like 60% of our housing is affordable. That's the kind of goal that we need to be fighting for. Now, not all of that is going to be inclusionary. Some percentage of that needs to be inclusionary, 30% in Central SoMa. We should always be pushing to do more. But the city has to be building a lot more affordable social housing to be able to meet our need. So when I think about 5,000 a year, sounds good. We should always push for more than that. But we need to get it done, and we need to fight to make sure that the highest percentage of that is affordable, and the city is going to need to be on the ground getting that done.
Okay. We warned our candidates about this, that we're going to ask them to ask a question to one of the other candidates. And we have come to that moment in the debate. So, Christine, I think you're first. If you'd like to ask a question to either of the two candidates.
Okay, hopefully we'll get to 2 questions. I'm gonna start.
Sonja, sorry. Turn my mic off. I'm going to start with Sonja. Hopefully we'll get to 2 questions. So Sonja, you and I are both new moms. We got young kids. How is that going to define your leadership style? Like, how's that going to make you different on the board of supervisors? And what are the first 3 things that you want to do as a new mom on the board of supervisors to keep people the same?
As a new mom, one of the things I think about frequently is the work that you were doing to build more daycare centers. And especially more daycare centers near where we work. I'm very fortunate. I work for myself, so my boss can't tell me not to bring my baby to work, and so I do. And it probably annoys my coworkers a little bit. Not everybody can do that. At least we should be able to have daycare like in the first floor of the office building we work in, or wherever we're working. Because the truth is, there's a lot of effort to make the workplace equal for women, but we're not, and right now the trendy thing is to make sure that people have time to be at home with their kids, and that's good, and make sure that women have a place to pump in a lactation room, and that's good. But the real galaxy brain version of this, hopefully the future is, that why should you have to go into a little room to pump? Why can't you just go get your kid who's a couple floors down at the daycare that's almost on site? So those are the things that I'm thinking about as a new working mom. And yeah, I appreciate that you have already started working on that.
My question is also for Sonja. So we actually have our offices about a block and a half from each other. So we frequent the same coffee shops in the same area in West SoMa. One thing that I'm sure you're aware of is that on the corner of 8th and Mission, there at any time can be dozens of people who are dealing drugs. And one of the issues that we didn't talk about in this debate yet is public safety and crime. We had somebody who came into our office who actually said that they're recovering and they're in a residential treatment facility, and and how much it frustrates them and pains them to have to walk by that every day. What do you think we can do to address that reality in so many parts of our district?
Yeah, it is. Guys, it's a good thing that the people that are running for office walk by that every day. You know, because we think about it all the time. Safe injection sites. I'm so glad that we have a mayor who's been spearheading safe injection sites. I'm so glad that Scott Wiener is in the Capitol trying to pass state law that will facilitate safe injection sites. Because what we have now basically is already an unsafe injection site at the corner of 8th and Mission. The other thing actually that Rudy from United Players put in my head, I walk by the guys that sell those drugs. They know my name, well, because my name is all over the place and a t-shirt on it. I say, hi, Sonja. I say, hi. I'm a fellow campaigning, so these are small business people in my community. Maybe I should stop. I don't really know how to interact. But what I ask myself, and I haven't asked them yet, but I'm going to, is there some other job that they would rather be doing? You know, is there something we can do? Because a lot of the guys that are selling drugs are young guys. People who maybe would like to be doing something else. I don't think drug dealers not actually that well paid of a job, and it's very, very dangerous. So I would like to see if the city can explore how we can take people away from that mode of life, at the same time as we treat drug addiction as the public health problem that it is. Thanks. So, Christine, question for you. As a parent, particularly in Mission Bay, do you feel like the school board has done enough for parents in Mission Bay?
Well, all right. Yeah, no. I got it. All right. So, I am highly familiar with the Mission Bay redevelopment project area. Block 14, which is across the street from the Kaiser Center, is set aside for Mission Bay School. What dismays me is that in the plan it said if there is no school 30 years from the effective date of this agreement, there's no school at all. They're going to make that into something else, and then the parcel across the street will just be a park, and that'll be it. We are about getting on less than 10 years from the effective date of that agreement, and still I see nothing out of the ground. So that's a little bit of a challenge. The other thing is we need to make sure that our schools are supporting ages 0 to 5, early child care. That's where we lose families. 0 to 3 is when your and my son's little brains are like getting all the neurons and whatnot, and there are very few options, even though we do have a couple of schools in District 6. So we've done very little on early childhood care, at least in this district. And Mission Bay School, if there's not a shovel in the ground very soon, there may be nothing there at all. So we can do better, but I want to highlight for people that the Board of Supervisors is not the school district. Those are separate elected officials. So I might ask, my opponent, maybe you stay on to the end of your term and make sure that that gets done.
And that's why we have candidates ask questions. I've got one more question, then we'll go to closing statements. People who run for office, and God bless you for running for office, often think that they have special skills that they can bring to this situation. What advantage or special skill do you believe you could bring to the office of supervisor in District 6?
Wait, I think it's me. Okay. I'm sorry. What advantage or special skill? We need people on the board of supervisors who are advocates for their communities, yes. But we also need supervisors who know what they are talking about and know what they are asking for. You're going to get your meetings as a supervisor with the agency heads. You're going to get your meetings with your fellow colleagues on the board. You're going to get your meetings with the mayor. But when you walk in those meetings, and I can tell you this firsthand from being on a charter commission, which is what I did, they're going to say, okay, District 6 supervisor, what do you want to see happen? And if you don't have concrete answers, you'll just get the runaround from all these agencies and their staffs, and the mayor and their staff, and the other supervisors and their staffs for the entire term that you were in office. 4 or 8 years goes by quickly. You need to have a strategy. You need to know what you want to accomplish, and you need to know what you are asking people to drive towards, and that's what I offer. 14 years of experience in public finance, in land use, in community development. You ask me a question about anything, you get an answer, and when I get in the room from day one, I know exactly what I'm going to be asking people for, and people will see the difference on the streets and in their lives.
Well, I think that one of the challenges that the supervisor in this district is going to have is actually bringing people together to solve some of the toughest problems we have. If you look at the folks who are supporting me in the community and across the city, I think we've built one of the broadest coalitions of anybody who's ever run for a district supervisor. Folks like Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, along with folks like Aaron Peskin and David Campos. The full breadth, I think, of being able to work with people to actually deliver with solutions and having a track record of doing that. Getting past the ideology, getting past these small divisions that I think have held this district back. I think that's what people are looking for in this district, and that's what I offer more so than anybody else running in this race.
I think what I offer is the belief that things can be very different. When I first started, as I mentioned before, organizing pro-housing renters, everybody had given up on the idea that we could build enough housing. Back then, still people say that we can't build our way out, right? People say that a lot less now than they used to. And when I started organizing, what I did was I brought a lot of people into the political process who hadn't been in it, because before I started what was called then SFR, the Bay Area Renters Federation, there was no club for them. There was a club that believed that there was no way to build more housing, so we shouldn't have rent control, and there was no way to build more housing, so we should have rent control. That was the only conversation about affordability. And I brought a new idea, which seems very obvious now, which was, what if we had more housing? What if the pie was bigger? So and in the last 4 years, we've accomplished a lot, and I referred to some of it. One of the things I haven't talked about yet is that I was able to incorporate a nonprofit that sues the suburbs, right? This is something that people in San Francisco have been talking about a lot. It's the suburbs, and it is true. Part of our problem is that the suburbs are adding housing adding jobs and not adding housing. People were talking about doing something about it. I figured out how to actually do it. I didn't have a law degree. I wrote the petition myself, and then I raised the money, and now it's a healthy, active nonprofit that's enforcing the law all over the region. So I want to bring that ability to accomplish things to the next level. I'm supported by Scott Wiener and David Chu. I'm the only person on the ballot that's supported by both of the people that represent us in Sacramento. So that gives me an opportunity to coordinate when we need to solve statewide problems. And I have experience as a community organizer, which will allow me to pass laws that affect the whole city.
Very good. We're going to go to closing statements. I would just say this is the politest and best behaved debate I've ever been in. I'm just going to Christine first. Each candidate gets 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we'll wrap it up.
All right, my good policies, can stand for this. All right, thank you all for coming out and hearing us today. We really do have 3 great candidates. So I started off talking about my mom, I'm going to end by talking about my mom. So my mom worked with cancer patients. She would often be the first person that they would see after they got a diagnosis that may end their life. They're in crisis. Some people are angry, some people cry, some people are catatonic, but she had to pull them and their families out of it for at least a moment to take the next step, to tell them which pharmacy to go to schedule that next appointment. What I learned from my mom, hearing these stories over her 20, 30-year career in nursing, is you have to learn how to absorb that energy of people in crisis and then take the next step. And that's the type of leadership that I offer. There are so many areas in San Francisco and in District 6 where people feel like we are in crisis. And we feel a lot of different emotions, anger, disappointment, etc. But we have, as a candidate for the Board of Supervisors and as a supervisor, I want to absorb that emotion, look at the data, collaborate on solutions, and take the next step forward. So we can return the management of our streets back to our city so that our city is accountable for what our streets look like. We can open safe congestion sites. We can build a lot more housing and invent new public financing tools to reduce the impact of HUD getting rid of Section 8 and low-income housing tax credits not being worth what they were before. We can do all of these things. We can have congestion pricing to reduce traffic on our streets, but we have to take it one step at a time, do one thing at a time, and pull ourselves out of crisis. And I hope to be your next supervisor so I can help all of us do as well.
Well, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Chuck, for moderating to all of the hosts. As I've said, I want to stand up for District 6 residents. I think it's a little surprising to be attacked for being too focused on District 6 in a race where we're running for District 6 supervisor. I am not running to go sue the suburbs. I'm not going to go pick fights on the other side of the city. I'm not going to go shout people down on the steps of City Hall. I'm actually going to fight for you all, the residents of District 6. What I hear again and again as I go around this community, whether it's in the Tenderloin, whether it's in SoMa, whether it's in Mission Bay, I'm actually hearing the same thing, which is that our district has tremendous needs. We're taking on most of the development. Most of the people who live on the streets are here. Most of the crime incidents are here, twice as many as any other police district, yet we are not getting the resources to meet that need. That is not fair. We have been failed by City Hall. We have been failed by the planning department. And our residents need a champion. Someone who is focused here, block by block, laser focused on getting people off the street into navigation centers, building affordable housing, and making sure that we have safe and clean streets. I'm not going to go and fight other people. I'm not going to troll people on Twitter. I'm going to fight for you. That's why I'm running for District 6. I would love to have your support.
Hi. I'm from Philadelphia. I moved out here in 2011. And in Philadelphia, the anxiety is about losing population. For 70 years, people were leaving. We were losing our tax base. We had great public infrastructure, and the residents were afraid, who's going to take care of it? I moved out here, and San Francisco has the opposite problem. We have too many people, supposedly. We have too many taxpayers. We have such economic success that instead of making us feel happy, it makes us feel anxious. And that's something that I think that we really need to change, because it's that anxiety, it's that feeling of scarcity that forces us to fight with each other, even though in a lot of ways we really agree with each other. So that's why I've been dedicating my career to ending that feeling of scarcity, to making sure that we have enough housing that we don't have to fight with each other over the housing that we already have. I want to integrate our neighborhoods. And a part of taking the next step is to legalize affordable housing all over the city. I've talked about that before. In 80% of the city, you cannot build an apartment building, which means you cannot build affordable housing. And it's not fair. I think it's something that is worth doing. I think integration is an exciting project that America never really finished. And it's time to elect somebody who wants to work on a big idea like that. It'll also make our city more pleasant, and it'll make us all stop fighting with each other so much. Thanks.
All right, that concludes our debate, and I would just like to say that at a time, I think, when people are questioning democracy and if it works, to hear such reasonable and thoughtful candidates makes you realize that democracy starts in the grassroots, and it gives you hope. Don't forget to vote.
A big round of applause for all of our candidates and our moderators. I hope everybody here is registered. If you're not, we do have voter registration forms right there on the corner. Encourage everybody to join both the United Democratic Club and the Eastern Neighborhood Democratic Club. And then if you're not on the campaign's mailing list, they do have sign-up sheets all the way down there. So stay connected, and we'll see you over there. Thank you, everybody.